Okay, so if you look through that packet, most of it is, so you're gonna see the first couple of pages is exclusive right to sell. Then we're gonna go into the MLS input form. After that, we're gonna go into the seller's property disclosure. And some addendums and some of the disclosures we have here at Section 21. The biggest thing we're going to talk about is the first exclusive right to sell. We'll probably spend, I would say, 75% of this class on the exclusive right to sell, and then we'll fly through the other ones really quick. So don't get too panicky when we're into this a ways. You're like, oh boy, we got a lot left to do, and we're not quite there yet. So don't panic on that. It's kind of purposeful. I think if you understand the exclusive right to sell, which is the main document that obligates your client to us. If you do that, then everything else we can kind of fix and work through as we have the listing. But if you don't have the exclusive right to sell filled out right, then you won't even have a listing to start with.
Right.
Okay. So at any time, ask questions. I know Douglas, you've never taken a listing before, so ask some good questions on that. So
I always just take my dad with me to listings.
is that what you do? All right, well, this is going to help you, give you confidence so you can take your own. All right, so if you take the exclusive right to sell, the first part of it that I want to point out is right at the very top. It says this is a legally binding contract. Read carefully before signing. Designated agents, brokerages. So one of the questions a lot of the public asks is, well, I can just get out of my contract. I'm not going to list with them. I don't want to deal with the agent anymore. The challenge with that is we are signing a contract. There's two parties to that contract. You got us as the brokerage, and then you have the client as well. The challenge with that is they can't interrupt like one way, they can't cancel it. So as much as they want to do that, they can't do that. Now, would we give them a chance to cancel it? Absolutely, but that depends on the circumstances you find it. So I always like to point that out. And if you want, right, for that. There you go. Okay, I always want to point that out because I get calls all the time that clients are like, well, I just don't want like my agent anymore. I'm going to cancel it. And it's not as easy as just canceling the contract.
Right.
Okay. So that's the first section. Now we're going into this is agreement. We're going to go through each of these sections so that you kind of understand what to put there. Some of them will be longer than others. We're not going to read the whole contract to you, but I'm going to kind of read around the blank lines. This agreement is entered in the effective date. That day is going to be the day that you want it to be activated. Okay, so our contract is a little different than the MLS contract, where in the MLS contract, what date they sign it is the effective date. In this particular case, you can distinguish an effective date that's in the future. Now, the question would be, why would you want to, if I'm going to take a listing today, why would I want to put it like in 2 weeks? Like, let's say that I'm going to do it on May 15th. I'm going to want this to be effective. Why wouldn't I just make it effective today? On the top, that first line.
Well, I mean, if they're waiting for another contract for the previous agent to expire, I've had that happen.
Yeah, so if they're already in a contract and we're
Yeah.
waiting for that to expire, that would be one reason. Okay, what are some other reasons?
You would need some time to get things ready and in place before it goes on the MLS, like photos and things.
Yeah, so they're not quite ready to have it on the MLS, but we want to make sure we have the agreement in place. So what is the disadvantage? So if I use the MLS contract and the effective date is today, and I sign the contract today, but they don't want to be on the MLS until 2 weeks on May 15th, what problem does that create for me, or does it create a problem?
You have to have it on the MLS within a certain time frame of it being signed. And so that would be the disadvantage to going that way, because then it would just add extra paperwork of doing the opting out of what, I don't know the exact terms,
No, that's
Idaho
perfect.
things now.
Which is what it is. So if you get a listing, you got to have it on the market within 3 to 5 days. If you're actively marketing the property, it has to be on within 24 hours. Or you get or you'll get fined. And it's like $500 a day until you get it. So it gets pretty expensive. So you'd have exactly what you said, you'd have to add more documents to it. If the effective date is today. Now, the reason that we don't want the effective date some other time is because what happens if somebody else talks to them over the weekend and then they want to sign the agreement? Okay, that's the disadvantage. However, we have, and I'll show you in our contract where we have it written, that they can't sign another agreement until or during that waiting period.
Oh,
Okay, so we do set that up for protection. So you're gonna do the date, whatever date you're going to go active. And then the month, the year between Century 21, the company and the seller. So keep in mind that all listings taken are the broker's listings. They're not the agent's listings. So you're taking it under Century 21. So the principal broker, Russ Orchard, is responsible for that listing. It is his listing.
so he's
You-
liable.
You are going to be the agent assigned to it, but not the actual agent in there. So the question that I get a lot is, oh, I've got a problem with this client and I want to take them to small claims court or something. That actually has to be the brokerage that does it, not the agent.
That's great.
Okay, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then the seller's name, where are you gonna find the seller's name? If I'm writing an offer, well, actually, that's for the Repsy, but let's say that a seller gives me their name and I put it down. But then we find out later that seller's property is in a trust. Do I have a legal contract if I just have the seller's names up there?
No, so it has to be in the trust.
Okay, it has to be in the trust name. So what I would suggest is before you go on a listing appointment, you find out what
The address.
the address, the title, what if it's in the trust name, and then you write the trust name on there, and then they can sign for it.
And then tax ID would be the most accurate way to verify.
Yes, except for sometimes that's not updated as
Okay.
often, so it would be reaching out to a title company and finding out what it was. Okay, number one, terms of the listing, seller hereby grants the company, including, this is where your agent, this is where you put your name as the authorized agent for the company. And then this date right here, it says ending on 5 p.m. on blank date, blank month, blank year, the listing period. So the errors that I see on this one a lot is that they put today's date. So if I put today's date on that and I sign it today, what problem did I just create?
Your contract expires at the end of the day.
My contract expires today. And as funny as it sounds, and I think that agents aren't reading this, but I see that more times than you can imagine. I actually see that date.
Does
Say,
Century 21 have like a 6-month minimum requirement for the dates on the contracts?
we don't have a specific minimum.
Okay.
We do suggest that you get a 6-month contract.
Yeah.
When you take a listing, when is most of the money that you are going to invest in the property going to be spent?
First 30 days.
First 30 days, right? First 2 weeks,
Mhm.
really the first week.
Yeah.
Once you've got your sign up, put your key box on there, got the photos done, got your marketing done, you spent most of your money, right?
Yeah.
So I would not suggest taking anything less than 90 days. But 6 months is a pretty good time.
Mhm.
Now, if I always base that time period on what month of the year that I'm actually listing the property. So if I list anything in September, October, or November, any of those 3 months, I will always take an 8 to 10 month listing or a
Okay.
year.
That makes
And the
sense.
reason for that is because I don't want it expiring right before spring hits
Mhm.
if it goes that long.
That makes sense.
And that was based off of an experience I had. I had a listing up in a really nice neighborhood up in Sandy, up in Pepperwood
Oh,
area.
yeah.
Okay,
That's a
and
nice area.
great listing. 6 months, not one property sold in that entire neighborhood, not one.
Oh, wow.
And spring started going and we started getting showing requests like crazy. And I thought, this is going to sell. We're priced right, it's ready
Yeah.
to sell, it's going to get sold. Well, my listing was gonna expire. So I went to the seller and I said, I just need 2 more weeks. And I'll get this property sold for you, 2 weeks. And his response to me was, when we chose, there's two agents when we were, when I was doing my presentation, he says, when we chose, I wanted you and my wife wanted the other agent, but we went with you.
Uh-huh.
So now we're gonna give the other agent that my wife chose his opportunity. Sure enough, it went under contract the next week and it sold within 30 days. And that guy was the hero and I was not. And they figured it was my fault. But the reality is, if you look at that neighborhood,
Yeah,
not one property sold for 6 months and then 7 sold in that next month.
was it because the weather?
Not the weather, it's just the timing and the market that was there, but you know, that was a huge commission check for me right then that I gotta watch go away. So if I would have just had it a little bit further, so for me, it's just my own personal thing where if it's September, October, or November, I'm gonna take it longer.
Mhm.
12 months, not a big deal. Any longer than 12 months, I would look at it more specifically as like land or a commercial property or something that's cabin property or something that you're dealing with access or problems with that.
Okay,
Hopefully, we don't have to go back to that, because the last 2 years, if you couldn't get it sold in 3 months, your property was extremely overpriced and
Mhm.
it wasn't working anyway. So. Okay, so that's what that is. Any questions on section 1?
No.
Okay, section 2 is the brokerage fee. This is basically what it's going to cost for them to work with your services. So this is something that I see commonly misunderstood in the listing agreement. When you take a listing, are you taking, let's say that it's a 6% listing. Are you taking a 6% listing or are you taking 3% and then the buyer's getting 3%? Does that make sense? My question?
Both. You're
Both?
taking it at 6%, but then you're offering 3% or whatever you decide you're gonna do.
Okay,
But
so
that
let's say
first line is the total commission that will be coming in. And then the second line is where you specify just the buyer's agent commission. So
Right.
if you're gonna take it at 6 and split it half and half, you do 6 in the first line and 3 in the second line. Meaning the second group of lines, not the
Yeah.
second line with the dollars.
Yeah, down here at the bottom, the MLS, the BAC is going to be that. So there's 2 lines on this section that we're gonna fill out. One is the brokerage fee at the top. That's gonna be the total fee that you're collecting. Okay, so that doesn't take in, it takes in account your BAC. So
So
if I'm gonna
6%.
if I'm gonna offer a 3% BAC and I'm taking a 3%, then that total is gonna be 6.
Okay,
Okay, if we don't, I saw this last week. In fact, I had to call an agent on it last week just to check and verify.
Mhm.
They had 2% on the top number and they had 3% on the bottom number. So what's the problem that created?
well, the numbers don't add up. It should have been 5% on the top.
Should have been 5, but we took a listing at 2% listing and I'm paying 3% out.
So the company's losing 1% that they have to pay that buyer's agent.
Yes, the agent is gonna have to come up with 1% to pay the buyer's agent
Oh, wow.
in order for them to get that property sold. So obviously it was a mistake. They wanted 5% total. They were gonna do 2% for them and 3% for the buyer's agent. But if I write 2 on the top number there,
You
my
gotta pay
total
them.
commission being paid is 2%.
Can they call overs?
Call overs?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
A do-over?
A do-over? Yes, we have to do an addendum to the contract to redo that. So luckily we caught it before they closed.
Whew,
And so we were able to fix it because they were all under the assumption that it was 5
the whole time.
the whole time. So it wasn't a hard fix.
Okay,
But I can tell you that happens more times than you would imagine because we're not reading contracts and we don't understand what they're saying. We're just writing the amount of, oh, I'm gonna take this number. So now, do we have to put a specific number in on the BAC?
Down here.
Yep, down on the bottom one where it says the commission. Do I have to put a specific number?
I'd make me nervous leaving anything.
Not technically.
Not technically, right? But if I offer my listing at a 1% BAC, am I doing my client? Am I representing them well, or am I doing them a disservice?
oh, big disservice. A lot of agents will shop listings to show their clients based on their VAC.
Yeah, okay, so if my listing's only gonna offer them 1% if they're gonna come, or less than 1%, we're not seeing it as much lately, but I saw one at $1. VAC was $1.
What?
Like, if my client's worth $15,000, if I sell them somebody else's house, or if I help them buy your house, I get $1. Am I doing them a service, or am I hurting my client?
You're definitely hurting your client, but $1?
Uh-huh. Okay, so you can put whatever you want there. I would suggest that you, if you're going to discount your commission, don't discount the buyer's agent's commission. The buyer's agents are working hard too, and the more we discount everybody's commission, eventually every commission starts to come down, and then people are out of the business.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. Okay, so make sure that number is there. We do charge the $295 transaction fee for the office. That's where you would put it. So you do 6% plus $295 transaction fee. Okay, it's not, it's just a brokerage fee now.
Mhm.
It's not considered a transaction fee because we can't have two different fees. So it all becomes one fee. It becomes the brokerage fee. So it would be 6% plus $295. Now, you can change that $295 to whatever you want. Like, you can make that $195, you can make that $0, you can make that $595. Because it's just an additional commission to it. So you have to understand why you're charging them for. So I always explain it to my clients like, so let me ask you this, if you had a buyer, would you ever pay for their appraisal?
Like us as agents?
Yeah, you as the agent,
Um,
normally. Normally, would you pay for their appraisal?
not as like a form of practice, no.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't, right? Okay, what about their inspection? Would you ever pay for their inspection?
No,
No.
not as a rule of practice, no.
No, because it's just part of the transaction,
Yeah.
right? It's a fee, something for them to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing with our $295 is. This is not something that gets to be put in your pocket. You have got to pay that to, the compliance and the Century 21 running the systems behind the scenes. It's not something you as an agent, it's another expense.
Mhm.
So I just present it to my client as part of the expense. Where I see a lot of agents will negotiate that and be like, oh, I'll just pay for it, which is fine, you can pay for it. But I kind of look at it as like the inspection or appraisal.
Mhm.
You wouldn't, like, under certain circumstances, you might consider helping them with it. But majority of the time, you're not.
Yeah.
So that's how I
think
kind of look
that
at it.
smells right.
What's that?
I don't think that smells right,
What's that?
because your commission depends on what that appraisal comes back at, so it doesn't feel arm's length.
You mean if they pay for the
If
the
you
appraisal?
did,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
it
so,
doesn't feel right.
yeah, so for me, that's not what you would do, and I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah.
But I can see this transaction fee gets dropped all the time. And
Oh,
it's like,
really?
it's not dropped as the company, the agent pays for it
Oh,
all the time. And it's because they don't want to have that discussion with their client about, so I'm paying you 6% here, but another $295, why am I paying the $295? If you understand what that $295 is,
yeah,
then it's not a big deal. It's just it's a transaction fee.
Yeah.
For it. Make sense?
yeah,
Do
Okay.
other brokerages have it?
Other brokerages do have it, yeah.
it's higher. Mine that I came from was $495
Yeah.
for residential. And anything that was considered non-residential was $595 or higher, depending on square footage.
So, and it basically comes down to the costs to doing business. That's what
Mhm.
we're doing. Okay, so you can take whatever you want on it. Now, here's a scenario that I want to throw out to you and see what problem we created. So let's say that you decide you don't want to pay you don't want your client to pay the $295. So you do an addendum to this agreement
Mhm.
and you write in it and say, the brokerage fee is to be 0. Referring to the $295. What
Okay.
did I just do?
Well, I mean, you have to pay it.
You made the total commission 0 now.
Okay, say it again, Douglas.
You've made the total commission 0 because now both of those two numbers are considered the brokerage fee. And so
Um,
you've taken out all commissions.
Yeah, so that's what I see what's happening is we're referring to, like, I just want to take out that $295, I'm gonna pay for it for my client, which is fine, we're fine with that. but we're referring it to as the brokerage fee because it's all the same.
Oh,
It's all the same. So when I
You
say.
would want to just
brokerage fee
put brokerage fee to be 6% plus $0.
Correct. That's the correct way to do it. So I'm gonna say the brokerage fee is 6% and $0. So that will clarify it. But what happens is we're trying to fix it and we end up zeroing out our commissions right at the
Right.
last minute. Okay, so don't do that. And then we have at the bottom of this one where we have the seller's initial it.
Mhm.
So what was happening, and right or wrong, it's for each individual to decide on what they want to do. But what was happening is people were taking 6 or 7% listings. And they were taking 5% to the seller side and 2% to the buyer side, or 1% and 6%, or they were offsetting it. Okay, is there any rule that says I have to split it in half?
no,
No. Okay, so that's one thing we have to keep in mind is there is no rule that says I have to split this in half.
right,
Okay, so I can make those adjustments. But what happened was we've all agreed that a 1% commission hurts the seller, right?
sure, yeah,
Okay, we all agreed that. So if I take a 6% listing and I have 5 for the listing side and 1 for the buying side, it's gonna hurt the seller, right?
Mhm.
Well, the sellers didn't know that was happening. That's why we have it there, because now you're gonna have to disclose it. Now, can I take a 6% listing and take 5 and offer 1?
yeah, but you gotta write it out,
I'm gonna write it
Has to be
out and the
disclosed.
seller's gonna
yeah,
disclose it. So when would I do that? Like, there's a scenario where I would take 5% and give 1% away.
maybe like on a much higher price listing, like
Well, that would be awesome. It has nothing to do with price. Why I would do that.
I have
And
no
the
idea.
buyer agent would be okay with.
Well, I'm saying that, and there's a scenario, so in normal circumstances, that would hurt your seller, right?
Right,
Okay, if I offered you, so you and I are gonna work together, you're the buyer's agent, I'm the listing agent. I took a 6% listing, I'm giving you 1, I'm taking 5. Okay, so in a normal circumstance, that would not be great for you, right?
Right.
You wouldn't feel good about that.
No.
So when would be a scenario that I could do that? That everybody'd be okay with? Because it's not a requirement. I'm gonna tell my seller that I'm offering 1% and I'm taking 5.
The scenario that you would be okay with it is if you found the buyer too.
oh, if
Okay.
it was a.
So let's say that,
You were the
let's say
buyer
that,
agent.
well, so, but there's a caveat to that. So if I'm a limited agency, agent, I represent both sides.
Mhm.
I'm still making the full 6%. But let's say that I don't want to be a limited agent. Okay, my client doesn't want limited agency. And I got a buyer that wants to come in. And they don't have any representation. Okay, but they want representation. I could go to you and say, I've got a buyer that wants to buy my property. Will you do the paperwork and help them out if I pay you 1%? That would be the scenario.
Oh, okay.
Make sense? Because if I gave you a deal and I said, hey, here's what, you didn't have to do anything,
Right.
that's kind of like a referral fee.
Right.
That's the only scenario that I can see that, you do that. But this all has to be disclosed to the seller, which is why we now have signatures here. Because we used to not have to disclose that,
Right,
and people were taking advantage, agents were taking advantage of sellers and saying, I'll put a 1% out there and just see what happens. Right?
But the
So-
seller may have a buyer that they just want the transaction to go smooth and done proper.
So in that scenario, it'd be 2. Make sense?
But
Okay.
even now as a buyer's agent, I would still, if the commission is lower than whatever I feel I'm worth, I would still send over escrow instructions because just because they've initialed it doesn't mean that the agent has explained it right. And so it could create an awkward conversation on the back end if they, said, oh, well, we'll split it, but they wrote the wrong numbers there. Now you're in a spot where you can still get your full commission on the buyer side. Sorry, I know that's the wrong packet, but
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what it is when you represent the seller, you're representing the seller. When you represent your buyer, you need to represent yourself and the buyer. Okay, so protect yourself through the process. Just because the MLS says one price on the MLS or for the BAC doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you have to accept, right? What I would suggest is decide what you're worth
Mhm.
what you're going to charge and then go further.
Yeah.
And then stay on that. Okay, any questions on the brokerage fee?
No,
So the bottom, those two bottom lines need to add up to the top line.
Yeah, the two, well, this is gonna be the total, they don't need to add up to it. So whatever you're adding there, your compensation is going to be the remaining amount. So if I take a 5% here and I do a 3 there, how much am I making as a listing agent?
The two.
2, right? So if this, whatever number this has to, if this is the total, that's out of the total is going to be for there. Okay, one thing I do explain with my seller is I never tell them that it's that I'm splitting this. I talk about buyer BAC as a marketing cost as a listing agent.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm marketing to the other agents out there. If I offer enough incentive, they're going to bring me their buyers.
Right.
If I don't offer enough incentive, they won't bring me their buyers.
Right.
Okay, I present it like that because if I get in a scenario where I represent the buyer and they're like, well, you're not paying that buyer broker or the BAC, so I want less commission. No, the commission is what you're paying. I'm just telling you how I'm going to market your property.
Mhm.
Is how I do it. Okay, all right, number 3, protection period. Okay, so the protection period is what I call the keeping people honest section. There is no time set for you to put this here. I've seen 1 month, I've seen 2 months, I've seen 3 months. The reality is what it is it's to protect you as a listing agent where, let's say that you're coming up on your listing expiring next week. And the seller runs into somebody that says, I'd like to buy the property. And then they say, well, if you just wait 2 weeks, then I won't have an agent and I can give you at the price you want. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So in that particular scenario, this would protect you to still make your commission even if after it expired.
Mhm.
The only thing that's different on this one is if they relist it, then we would have, and it's a new person that goes through it. It would basically have to be somebody who you've shown the property to protect you through that process. Otherwise, it doesn't really. So for me, taking it out 3, 4, 5 months doesn't make any sense. That means I have to monitor it. And like,
Yeah,
but if I can, I usually usually put 1 month there, just so that if somebody comes back in that month, then
Mhm.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on 3?
No.
Okay, number 4, seller warranties and disclosures. Okay, so the part that I want to read on this one, I think is really important is right in the top, the seller acknowledged that they have entered into exclusive right to sell agreement with Century 21. This agreement may have an effective date later than the date the seller has signed this agreement. So remember, I might have put the date 2 weeks from now
Mhm.
on the top, okay? Effective date, the ERS is later than the ERS was signed. The seller agrees they will not enter into another ERS agreement with any other brokerage. If the seller does enter into another agreement, this ERS shall govern. So this is what's protecting you if you sign it and then we're not going to activate it for 2 weeks. And then another agent comes in and says, oh, it's not active for 2 weeks, so I can sign my agreement. No, they can't sign the agreement.
Right.
But if you use the MLS one that says effective date,
Mhm.
and you put that effective date on the 15th,
Mhm.
you really don't have an agreement until the 15th. So if somebody signs a contract, it's prior to your deadline, which means theirs is going to
Right.
take precedence. Make sense?
Yes.
Do people lie about that?
People lie all the time. Have I seen that one? But yeah, that's. If they don't want to work with you, they look for ways to get out, but. I mean, my guess is if you're 2 weeks out, you would be working on that, working with the client, so hopefully that doesn't happen.
It happened to me at my last brokerage. I lost a listing to this couple that were ITIN clients. And the reason that, so like I had an agreement, but we just used the regular one from the MLS. And then they, like, I was following up with them on everything, and they were just like, oh, well, we actually signed an agreement with our friend's cousin, and she's gonna represent us and not take a commission. And she's like, so that's why we chose her, because we don't have to pay a commission.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but you have an agreement with me, and then I took it to my broker, and he's like, unfortunately, because you had that date as being a week out, because they said they needed a week to get ready.
Mhm.
Because they're like, we want to clean the house and we want to, you know,
Yeah,
have a
you got
cleaning company
cut out
come
of the
in.
deal.
And I got pushed out because I wasn't
Yeah.
willing to take no commission.
So that's what our exclusive right to sell will
Which is
protect
great.
you in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then the last part of the seller's disclosures part that I wanted to read to you is very bottom. Seller will be required to notify listing and the company in writing of any defects in the property known to the seller that materially affect the value of the property. So remember, sellers are obligated to disclose all material effects of the property, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so they need to disclose that to us in writing. So just be like them telling us there's a problem
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that we're constituting that we now know this problem. We need them to have it in writing.
Okay,
Isn't that part of Global's disclosure?
Uh-huh.
is it just physically something with the property as far as like like the building itself, or would that include like, if say like they're selling like a condo and their HOA has gone into a contract with a property management company
Mhm.
that's doing a lot of shady stuff, and that's why the person is wanting to sell their condo because they want to get out from this management,
Mhm.
would that like fall into that same?
Yeah, they
thing?
need to disclose that in writing to us, and then you, as an agent, what I would do is I would look at that and say, is this something that they need to be disclosing? And
Mhm.
have them fill that out in the seller's disclosures.
Because if they don't disclose something like that and someone buys the condo and then they realize, oh my gosh,
This is the
this is
reason.
horrible, it ends up in litigation. That's
Yeah,
like a
so
litigation.
this is,
situation.
the seller's disclosures is really the one way the seller can get sued in the process.
Yeah.
If they disclose everything, even if there's a problem and it's disclosed and somebody buys the property, that seller is off the hook,
Okay,
okay? So,
I think that was discussed last week, that's one of the disclosures.
yeah,
Out of 14 of them,
yeah, this,
it's a ton of them.
it's a ton of them, but yeah, I would definitely do it. So any questions on the warranty?
No.
Okay, agency relationship, remember, we have to establish relationship in the state of Utah. So basically, when you establish agency, it gives us our fiduciary duties, including loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and any other duties required by law. So just because they ask you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it if it's illegal.
Mhm.
But let's say that in fact, Douglas, you work with a lot of buyers, so I'm gonna ask you on this one. If you have a buyer that wants to put in an offer that's $300,000 less than the asking price, and you think it's absolutely ridiculous, do you have to submit that offer for them, or do you have, or can you tell them it's ridiculous and you're not gonna submit it?
No, you have to submit it.
Okay.
I also would tell them it's ridiculous, but you have to submit it.
Yeah.
So we had a scenario where, the same scenario where a person wanted to buy a property, they wanted to submit 300,000 under ask price. The agent said, that's ridiculous, we're never getting it accepted,
No,
and I'm not gonna submit that, I don't wanna offend them. They called the brokerage and they said, hey, we wanna break our buyer broker agreement with this agent. And when we found out that they weren't living up to these obedience, the fiduciary duty, we had to release them from the buyer broker agreement.
Yeah.
So, but
So a good way to combat that though, is a lot of times they'll say that while you're at the house. And so you can just say, hey, let me call the listing agent right now then. And I'll pitch them the idea of that offer and then put it right on speakerphone in front of your client.
yeah,
And let them hear the listing agent's reaction of,
yeah,
hey, we're gonna offer 300,000 less than what it's listed for. And then say, look, I'm happy to write it up still, but we know what's gonna happen.
no, that's a great point.
mhm,
So, but that's under the fiduciaries. If you're breaking any of the fiduciaries, that's grounds for getting out of the contract for your client. So don't break those. If you are a limited agent, limit agent has some of the fiduciary duties that they can't be limited, they have to be neutral. If you're selling a property that another agent is in Century 21, it's still limited because the broker is now limited,
Okay,
okay? So both scenarios, you need the limited agency agreements. Whether it's you representing both parties or somebody in Century 21 is representing the other party.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah, so personally, I don't like doing limited agency. I'd rather do non-represented, but that's just me. But there's lots of reasons people would. Obviously, non-represented, you still make the full commission and you don't have to do all the paperwork for the buyer. But limited agency, you're just doing both paperwork, you're doing two transactions.
Yeah.
Okay, professional advice. This one is a big one. Don't give professional advice on something you don't know. That's the fastest way to get yourself into trouble. Best way to do, like when somebody asks you for recommendations for services and you know some people, the best way to do it is to give them options.
mhm,
Even if you have a specific one you like the most, I would say, you know, these are some people that I've used this person the most, and I've really had a good experience with them, but either any of these will work. Or you could choose your own, so don't limit it to say, this is the inspector you need to use.
Yeah.
This is the title company you need to use, all of that, we can influence them, but we don't want to cut it off at this is the only or only options for what we have. We put these other sections in bold here that I'm going to read to you. The seller is advised not to rely on the company or any other agents of the company for determining regarding the physical or legal condition of the property. So basically, we're letting them know that don't rely on us for our opinion on that.
mhm.
You can hire a professional. Then the last one, strongly recommend the seller obtains such independent advice. If the seller fails to do so, the seller is acting contrary to the advice of the company. So this is in regards to all of our disclosures as far as, you know, the ones I find the most is, hey, do I have, this is my primary residence and I've lived in this for 5 years, so do I get my tax credit from it? Well, most of the time, yes, but are we a tax advisor?
No,
No, so could there be a scenario where they didn't get it? Well, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
So you want to be really careful when you're giving other advice. I personally don't like to go to my inspections for that very reason. So I'll have them meet my inspector at the house
mhm,
so that they can ask this inspector questions and not me,
Yeah.
because I have the relationship with them, so they're gonna ask me, well, do you think that's important? Should I get that fixed? And what if I say no, you shouldn't get that fixed?
Stay out of it.
Stay out of it.
yeah,
So that's the same with the seller. They have questions. We had one that's in litigation right now because of a boundary line dispute,
Oh,
you know, and the agents need to stay out of it.
mhm,
Like, oh, that's not gonna be a problem. You know, we had one agent say, oh, they've had that driveway on that property for years. That won't be a problem. Sure enough, it was a problem.
mm,
Okay, so don't do that. Professional advice. 7. Go down, let's do 7 and 8 really quick. 7 and 8, dispute resolutions and attorney fees and governing. Basically, this is how, if there's a problem in the transaction, this is how it's going to be handled. And then this is a really important one. This is if you don't have an exclusive right to sell, you can't ever go back for them. If through no fault of the company, any litigation arises out of the seller's employment, the company under this listing agreement, whether before or after closing, the seller agrees to identify the company. So if you've ever been involved in a lawsuit, okay, a buyer gets mad at a seller, they're going to sue. What does an attorney do when there's a lawsuit starting?
go after the agent.
Okay, so I know there's a problem. I'm representing the buyer and I'm going after the seller. What, as an attorney, what do you think most of them are wanting to do? Any ideas?
get details of the,
They probably want to call the agents and figure out what happened.
Okay, they want to figure out what happened, but first they're going to identify whoever they can sue.
Right,
Okay, they're gonna say, if you were part of the transaction, you're part of the,
Right.
this
Yeah,
lawsuit. If you're part of that, because what that does is, if I identify 10 people in a lawsuit. And then I win, there's a chance that I'm gonna make more money on it, because I have a lot of people involved, right?
right,
Okay, so regardless, let's say the buyer is mad at the seller. And they sue each other. They're automatically gonna call you as the agent and the brokerage into that lawsuit.
mhm,
If it's not our fault. The seller's agreeing to indemnify us, which is basically to sign a paper that says they had nothing to do with it and they're out of the lawsuit.
mhm.
It's just defending yourself costs a lot of money. So that's one thing that is really important with that. Okay, so we want to make sure they sign that. If you don't sign it and you're part of the process, they can keep you in there. Any questions on those two?
No.
Okay, section 9 is a really long section. This is advertising and things that they authorize us to do. Remember, when we represent somebody, if they don't authorize us to do things, we can't do them.
Right.
This is where it gives us permission. So you got disclose on the MLS, square footage, financial information, obtain keys, put it on the MLS, hold open houses, place for sale sign, order home warranty, title, agreements, place earnest money deposit, and then put it under contract. Seller, oh, this is a really good one. This is on ours, not on the MLS one. That says, when the property is pending under contract, seller instructs seller's agent to not present any additional offers unless an offer is designated to be a backup offer. So what that means is that, let's say that I get it under contract and then somebody else sends me an offer. What does our obligation under the law say we have to do with that offer?
neither does that.
Well, it doesn't say
Present it.
backup is a choice, but what is it? Go ahead.
Present it.
You have to present it. Okay, so we have to present all offers. Well. You ever been in a scenario where you give them a really strong offer, you're representing your seller, you've convinced them this is the best offer you're gonna get. Then they sign it, and then like 2 days later, an agent just trying to win sends like a $20,000 over asking price that they're eventually gonna drop down anyway in the inspection. And what does your client think of you? Oh, I should have waited.
Yeah,
Should have waited one more, and I could have got a more price, and you're like, it won't even appraise for that price.
yeah,
So. This is giving us permission that we don't need to show more offers after you go under contract. This helps with, if we do like short sales and you get one into the bank. Like, we've got the offer, I'll hold on to it. Now, can you present it? Absolutely, but this is saying that we don't have to. Make sense?
yeah.
Okay. Any questions on seller authorizing us to do something? Oh, we did add one at the top here. This is a really big one. Very top, including print and electronic media shall first be approved in writing by the seller's agent. So what we were finding was, the seller advertises their property. They put your name on there to call,
Mm,
and they forget the brokerage name. Now, what happens when the division finds out that you have advertising out there without the brokerage name?
I'm gonna get fined.
You're gonna get fined $150. Now, the division doesn't care whether you did it or not.
Your name is on it.
Your name is on.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that does that, and then there's also, we added in here on G. Not limited to social media, videography, or any other platforms. We had a seller upset that their property was on an Instagram video feed.
Oh,
So we needed to add that in.
okay.
So we added that in. Okay. Section 10, personal property, seller acknowledges the company has discussed with seller safeguarding the property. So basically, when I go over this with the seller, I just say, anything like. There's gonna be people that are walking your house and I don't
Yeah.
know what their character is. If there's anything that's small and can be slid into a pocket. Money, jewelry,
Mhm.
put it away, because if they don't put it away, then what's gonna happen is they're gonna steal it and you're not gonna know.
Right.
Okay, biggest thing I see is prescription drugs. Okay, that's one that I see people accusing buyers of stealing, which they probably are,
Yeah, probably.
so.
It's easy access.
So I just tell them, personal property, just put it away.
Yeah.
Attachment, seller properties, disclosures, the data form. So this is where it talks about, what's included in the exclusive right to sell. So you need to have the property condition disclosure. You need to have the data form for the MLS. You need to have wire fraud disclosures incorporated with the listing agreement. So that's all included in the listing agreement. We can't forget those. So that's why if you get an email from compliance that says, hey, you didn't give us the wiring instructions. Well, that's because it's part of the exclusive right to sell. So unless you're like getting rid of that, you have to bring that to the paper. Okay, number 12, Foreign Investment in Real Estate Property Tax Act. This is where they actually have to acknowledge they are or they are not foreign person. So what's the problem if they are a foreign person and they don't disclose it? And they sell their property.
Can the IRS step in?
Okay, this is specifically for the IRS to get paid. This is the taxes. But what would be the problem if, let's say I have a seller, they didn't tell me they were foreign person, but they really are,
Mhm.
they sell the property and then they leave the country. What problem just got created?
They didn't have the right to sell that property.
No, they did. It's their property. They own the
I
property.
don't know.
Anybody know? Douglas, do you know?
Never heard of this.
James, have you heard of FIRFTA before?
Yeah, a little bit.
So what would happen if the seller is a foreign person, they're selling their property, and then they don't tell us that they're foreign, and then they leave?
Would they come after your commission at that point?
They're not gonna come after the commission.
Yeah, I'm honestly not too sure.
No, it's nothing to do with the agents. It has more to do with the buyer. Okay, so let's say that when you sell a property in the United States, you have to pay property taxes
Right,
on that, right? You have to pay the taxes off of the sale.
right,
Well, if they're a foreign person, when do you normally pay those?
that close.
Not the close. You're gonna pay those,
Oh, just
At
the
tax.
property tax?
not property tax, the tax season, your proceeds. So
Oh,
let's say that you,
Sale,
from the sale, where do you pay in those taxes?
I'm saying,
No, you're thinking of
but your income tax.
that's your income tax, right? So in April,
Yes.
right? When you have to file your taxes,
yeah,
and we have the exemption that, if you lived in the home for,
Well, you
to-
made money, right? You're
Mhm.
assuming you made money.
yeah, you made money on it
So you pay them like your income tax in April.
in April, right?
You have
Yeah.
to claim it.
You have to claim it. Okay, so what happens if that person is no longer in the country?
the buyer's gonna be stuck paying it.
The buyer actually gets stuck with it.
The buyer.
The
doesn't
buyer, the
pay it.
new, it's not fair. That's why this is here.
Yeah,
They just screwed the IRS.
No, the IRS will not,
Not be screwed.
they will not be screwed.
IRS
The
makes sure
IRS
they
will
don't
get their money. They will get it.
And go after the buyer.
They will put a lien on the property and the buyer will have to pay those taxes. So let's say it's a $30,000 tax bill. If they're a foreign person and they check yes, which is fine, you can be a foreign person and buy property in the United States. But at the close, the title company is going to pull out that money and hold it.
Right,
So the IRS gets their money.
Do you know? I think they did that on my 401k. They paid my taxes this morning.
Yeah.
That's what they do now.
Yeah, so what happens is they pay that. So if this is no, and everybody doesn't know that they're a foreign person,
mhm,
then those taxes aren't held. That money goes back to the seller. Now the seller leaves, they leave the country. The IRS is not going to just say, oh, that's bad debt.
mhm,
Oops. No, they're going after the buyer.
Shame on them.
yeah,
So are they starting to pay that they will start paying the IRS for that for income tax now?
Yeah, they will pull it out of the check. And they'll usually actually, so here's a good thing to know. If you're representing somebody who is a foreign person. and they're selling a property, you need to let them know that they're gonna pull out a little bit more than normal. So let's say they're gonna get $100,000 check. They might pull out $40,000 of that check and not give it to them. So if they're expecting all 100,000, and that's a question I would ask the title companies, because there's an actual formula that
Oh,
they
okay.
use that says, if you're gonna make this much money, this is how much money we pull, but it's always more than
So you're gonna
the number.
pay.
So like, let's say that the IRS is gonna take 15%, they'll take out 20
Mhm.
so that they're covered, because who would get stuck with it if they didn't pull out more? The buyer and the title company.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that's what that foreign one is, so I would just ask them, I would have them fill it out.
Mhm.
It's better to know than not, which is why it's also on the seller's disclosures for your buyer.
So
To look at
they
it,
might. They might be foreign and you might not know it. That's not always apparent. That's not
Yeah.
always obvious.
well, and I would be really quite cautious to say, hey, you're a foreign person, you should fill this out, because that could get into the line of discrimination
Right.
as well. It's just a matter of, this is what it is. As I, like foreign investment, read through this and make sure that how this applies to you.
And not everybody that's foreign leaves the country without paying their income.
Right. Right, so that's what I'm saying, there's not a problem with helping somebody who doesn't have a US citizenship. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what you need to make sure you're doing.
They're gonna start taking it. If
Yeah.
they haven't already, doesn't have anything to do
Yeah.
with being foreign.
Yeah.
I'm not foreign. They took it from
Yeah,
me.
that's true.
They didn't.
Can I ask a hypothetical, Jason?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So they would have to disclose on the seller's disclosures that they're a foreign person. So it sounds like that's the most important thing as a buyer's agent to look for, knowing this.
Mhm.
What happens if they lied on the seller's disclosure form? Are you still just kind of, I hate to play the what if game because
Yeah,
I've never even seen a foreign person in any transaction I've done. But in that scenario, there was nothing more you could have done really as a buyer or a buyer's agent.
yeah,
I don't
I would say that would be your case against them putting a lien on you, saying this is what was disclosed. And it would probably, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they don't lie about it.
There's a lot of.
I mean, the reality is those are just disclosures. It's more of the title company. The title company will pull their social security numbers, they will pull their numbers. It's basically what it is it's a flag for you to know to make sure this is happening.
Mhm.
The ones that I've seen come through the company, what happened was title found it and they pulled the money out, but the agent and the client didn't talk about it, and the client was mad. The client was mad at the agent for not telling them that,
Mhm.
$30,000 of their check wasn't coming back to them, so they were mad. So I think the disclosure is important, it is to keep your eyes open, but
Mhm.
ultimately the title company, they should be looking for these things too. Now, we did have a title company that was fraudulent here in Utah just last 3 months ago, so
Oh,
pick a good title company.
They're looking for people with dual citizenship too. But. You can't help that. And all they're doing is paying your income tax for you ahead of time.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, no, it's going to be due anyway, it's just, that's where it is. But the IRS, they will come after your money.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, they will not just say, sorry, bad debt.
right.
In fact, I think they're gonna even do more of it because they're hiring 12,000 people to work the IRS.
They're doing it already.
Yeah. All right, so electronic transmit and counterparts, basically that means if you're selling, you're signing this agreement and the one party signs it and then another party signs another one, but it's the same document, that would still count, so they can sign them differently.
Mhm.
Due on sell, that if you're doing a seller financing, you want to make sure that the do not sell is disclosed. And I would suggest that, moving forward, you'll probably see some of these try to go through. But banks will probably start calling loans due a lot more because they can get a 7% or not 7%, 7% interest rate versus the 3% that somebody's seller finance to somebody else so they can make money on it. You'll probably see more of that, just be aware of the due on sell clauses.
Okay.
Then the entire agreement, this includes all of those forms, so this entire agreement is seller property foreclosures, data form, wire fraud, disclosure, all of those, it's all included in there. Okay, so that's the exclusive right to sell. Like I said, that was an hour on the exclusive right to sell, and we're gonna be done in less than 30 minutes on the other ones, so
Yeah.
we'll go fast, promise, Douglas. All right,
Not if I keep asking hypothetical questions, we won't.
no, it's a good one, I just don't know the answer to that one. I haven't been in that scenario, but people are looking for
Me
ways
either.
around it every day.
I
Okay,
just
so
was
we're gonna go-
thinking about it.
Oh,
Yeah,
the
we're-
IRS, there's no way around it.
No, they're figuring out methods to do it, and we're trying to protect everybody as we go through. Okay, this
Jason,
is.
can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
Before you go on, you mentioned the unrepresented buyer disclosure, that you use that form if you're a limited agent.
Uh-huh,
And I have not, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. This actually says to the buyer that they're not going to be represented in the purchase of that property, right? Is that,
correct. Yeah,
so
the buyer
so
will sign it.
why would a buyer sign that? Or what advantage does that give the buyer? What value does that bring to the buyer? I'm wondering how to present that is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so there's a lot of buyers that feel like if they use an agent, they don't want to pay that agent commission for it, and so they feel like they can do it on their own. So I just present it to them and say, I'm representing the seller on this one. I just need to make sure if you don't have an agent that you're just representing yourself. And it basically, the form says the buyer is elected not to have an agent and representing themselves.
Okay, it doesn't change the commission schedule or anything though, right?
Nope, so if you took a 6% commission and they are unrepresented buyer, then you make 6%. Even if you offer on the MLS 3% to the buyer's agent, there's no buyer agent, so you take 6%.
Okay, so this would be good to use in any limited agency situation.
Personally, I would do the unrepresented buyer form instead of limited agency, but some agents like to do the limited agency. The
Oh,
difference-
I see. So you can use
difference
this
with
in,
limited agency is you're doing two transactions,
Mhm,
because you're doing a buyer's agent and you're doing the seller's agent.
mhm,
So you're actually
Okay.
having two transactions, so when you get paid, you're getting paid 3 on one and 3 on the other,
uh-huh.
which just a side note for you guys. We pay $2.95 on each transaction, right?
mhm.
So in that scenario, you're paying $2.95 fees because you're representing two different
Right.
people. If I do unrepresented and one fee, I'm doing a $2.95 transaction fee and the 6%.
Right.
Make sense?
Okay, right. So you use this form instead of the limited agency form.
I would, but that's just me, and some agents would way rather, like, to me, I don't care. Like, some agents want to sell, let's say, I sell 30 homes a year.
Mhm.
Well, that's great. Me, I'd sell 15 and make the same amount of money, and I would be okay with that too. Like, it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to get more transactions, then do that. But for me, most of the problems agents have is because of limited agency.
Yeah,
And I can tell you that the courts don't look highly on limited agency, because think of any professional business, like, let's just go to attorneys. Can an attorney represent two sides of a case?
no,
We are the only industry that allows for dual agency,
really. I didn't know that.
Mhm, I see.
and
Okay.
some states have outlawed it. So
Hmm.
my guess is in the next 5 to 10 years, Utah will probably outlaw it too.
Yeah.
We
What was
probably
their
will.
argument?
All right, Keith, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. They outlawed it because how can you represent
biased.
each person
Yeah.
fairly?
Objective?
Yeah, be objective in that process. How can you do it if you're represented? So for me, I like the unrepresented form because, one, I don't have to do all the buyer paperwork,
Yeah,
so whatever, but you guys can do whatever you want. We allow it. Okay, listing input. There's a couple things I've highlighted that I want to go through. Very top here, we won't spend a ton of time on it. You have to fill this out to put it on the MLS. Don't put your property on the MLS unless you have this filled out and signed. You guys all have broker load now. You can all go on the MLS and list your own properties and take them down. But if you don't have these things signed, you're doing things without permission. So from the brokerage standpoint, that's a no-no. Okay, so listing price, that's what you're going to put on there. Short sell. Do we understand what a short sell is? Okay, so a short sell is basically, I have to list the property and the proceeds that I get will not pay off the loan. So I have to get approval from
The bank.
the bank in order for me to sell the property, because I can't, if I owe $300,000 and I sell it for $200,000, it's not going to work.
Cause that's the listing price.
Yeah. Okay, so listing price, and then is it a short sell or not? Right now, we haven't had to deal with that in the last 5 years, but my guess is we'll start seeing that happen again.
There's one
shortly.
in Salt Lake just recently. They had like 8 offers, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they like disclosed on the listing, they updated and said, you know, the bank is reviewing the 8 offers that we received. And if they approve one of them, then this will be considered under contract. Otherwise, you know, your agent can call us and ask any questions.
Yep. No, sounds good. Okay, so then everything else is just information from the client. Couple things that I find are confusing. This one right here, this effective date. So you got a year built, what's year built, and then effective date. The effective date is a really weird one, and the best answer I ever got from it was they take the neighborhood and the year it should have all been remodeled becomes the effective year. So your property may not have been remodeled. So that date really doesn't have a lot of precedence to it, but you can see that on the tax data,
Oh,
what year it should have been remodeled, which would be the effective date.
okay.
Everything with a dot next to it is required, so year built is required, effective date is not required. And then your style. Let's see if there's any other ones on this one. Everything else is just all about the property. Let's go down HOA. Associations, pools, spas, pets. This is specifically talking about the HOA in here, animals, solar. This listing information. Okay, this is the next one that has the most questions on it. This section right here, listing type, exclusive agency listing and exclusive
Right. to sell.
right to sell. We don't take an EAL in Century 21.
Okay.
We only allow exclusive right to sells. Anybody know what dual rate means? You see a dual rate? Douglas, what does dual rates mean?
It's like if I'm gonna list it and another agent is gonna represent the buyer, it'll be 6%. But if I'm gonna do both sides, it'll be for 5%. So there's dual rates going on depending on who the buyer's agent ends up being.
Okay, so if I'm representing the buyer, then I'm gonna have a different commission than if somebody else is representing the buyer. So why would that be good to know as a buyer's agent coming into a property that I'm gonna write an offer on? If I see dual rate and it says yes, why would that be helpful for me to know that?
Shows potentially how aggressive you would have to get on your offer, knowing that there could be a 1 or 2% difference in the net cost to the seller by going with the seller's agent compared to a different buyer's agent. So you'd want to ask the listing agent if he represents any offers that are being presented to help know that.
Yeah, and does this listing agent have to disclose that?
Yes,
Yes, okay. So if you see that and you're representing a client, I would ask them, is any of the offers you're presenting your seller? Are you
Represented.
representing by the buyer? And if he says yes, then you know, or if they say yes, then you know that you could have a disadvantage. So if I give a full price offer and they give a full price offer, but their commission is gonna be dropped, then their offer could be yours.
do they have to tell you what the variable rate would be?
No, I don't think they have to tell you that rate. They just have to tell you that, yes, they represent an offer, and yes, there is a.
Dual rate.
Okay.
Next thing we get confused on is the gross and net. So gross is the purchase price. You're gonna get commission off the purchase price. Total purchase price. Net is purchase price minus all of the concessions. Is what your commission is gonna be based off of. Okay. Let's see. I think that is all of the big ones. The other one that I find messed up is in these remarks sections. Where it says agent remarks versus regular remarks. Okay, regular remarks are going to be public. Everyone's going to see them. Agent remarks is what the agents are going to see.
Oh,
Okay, so if I want the public to see this, that's what I'm going to write. If I've got any special instructions, I'm going to write on the agent remarks what those special instructions are.
okay.
Okay.
Like there's a code or something.
There's a code or, there's a cat in the house, make sure you don't let the cat out,
Right.
lock the door, like those type of things
Yeah.
where here you're like describing the home
Yeah,
and you're telling the good features.
Yeah.
Here you're telling the agent what to expect.
gotcha.
Okay. Let's see. This right here, this is one I see not filled out on our exclusive, our MLS very often, agent remarks or HOA remarks. This is where, like, you could eliminate 90% of the phone calls
Yeah,
from other agents if you just tell them what the HOA covers.
Yeah.
And
Not true. They aren't gonna read it and they'll still call you.
they still call you, but you're gonna eliminate more than if you don't have it there.
I will read it.
Cause Douglas, you're the agent that calls, you don't read it.
100%.
Yeah. All right, seller's property disclosures. This one we're actually gonna run through pretty quickly. I'm just gonna stop at this first part up here. This notice and then instructions to seller. So basically, instructions to seller. Seller is obligated under law and under Rep C section 7A, regardless of occupancy, to disclose to the buyers defects in the property and the facts known to the seller that materially and adversely affect the use of and value of the property that cannot be discovered by a reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. It's their obligation under law to do that. It's not a suggestion.
Mhm.
They have to be able to do this. Now, the key with the seller's disclosures, as an agent, never fill them out for them. Even if they are elderly, or in the scenario we had last month where the person was a heavy drinker and didn't want to fill them out and needed to fill them out. The agent filled them out for them. Don't do that.
No.
Okay, this is something they need to disclose. Okay, now if a seller says, should I disclose something? What's your answer gonna be? I don't care what they were disclosing. Should I disclose? If they say those words, what should you as an agent say?
Yes.
Yes. Jason?
Yeah.
Can they have, if they are elderly and it is difficult for them to see, can they have a family member fill it out for them if they're with them, asking them the question?
Yes, absolutely. That's how I would suggest doing it.
Okay,
So have somebody that they trust and they're competent to do that. I would just suggest it not be you.
Yeah.
Okay, because conveniently, when a problem comes up, they will forget, people will forget what they said. Okay, so in the scenario with the guy that was a heavy drinker, his agent fills out the contract. Now, down the road, somebody sues him. What do you think he's gonna say?
Well, my agent filled it out for me.
My agent filled it out for me.
Yeah.
And the agent, and then the courts are gonna say, why did you fill this out for them?
Right.
And you have no leg to stand.
Yeah.
So yes, if it's an elderly situation, have somebody else do it, just don't you do it.
Yeah.
Okay, or really document the fact that you're doing it on behalf of them and they've given you permission to do it. And that you can prove that you're doing
Not a
it.
big of a drinker.
okay. Thank you.
It's-
Probably is.
Anyway.
I don't know the scenario. All I know is the agent said I wrote it up for him and I said, why'd you write it up for him? And he said, because he isn't stable all the time. I was like, well, that's not an excuse. Don't do it. I kind of had to laugh because I couldn't believe he did it. Personally, but, all right, so every question in here, so I'm gonna kind of go just into one section. Okay, if it's grayed out, you don't need to do a check. If it has a mark, you need to do a check mark there, okay? The more information you have, the safer your seller is. I always tell my seller, if you're honest in this and you disclose everything in your home, then the chances of them coming back at you go down dramatically.
Right.
Okay, so we had a scenario in the company where there was a leak in the basement.
Okay.
Okay, the wall would leak in a rainstorm.
Okay,
Okay. Seller put it on there, said, hey, in a rainstorm, the wall leaks.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on, but there's something seeps through the wall. Buyer closes on it. Then the buyer turns around and there's a huge rainstorm, which we just had a huge rainstorm.
Yeah.
And the huge rainstorm created a big leak. Well, they went out there and then they dug it up and they found out it was a pipe that was leaking, not just the water.
mhm,
So they tried to sue the seller. Because they said you knew about this broken pipe
mhm,
and you didn't disclose it. Well, the judge looks at it and said, it says right here in your seller's disclosures, wall leaks when it
It
rains.
rains.
When did it leak? Oh, when it rained. Okay, case this.
right.
Okay, so, I also tell them that this is what you know. It's not, I'm guessing.
Right.
Like, I think this is what's happening. It's, do you know what's happening?
Right.
Okay, another scenario it said is this ownership one here. How long has the seller owned it? If it's an investor or somebody who's never lived in the property, they still have to fill out the seller's disclosures.
Mm.
They just don't know anything, so they're gonna mark things that I don't know.
Right.
But they still have to fill it out. What we were finding is they changed this because the old seller's disclosures, we used to have a form that said. Not, seller's disclosures not gonna be provided. And investors were just doing that because they didn't want to disclose anything. And the problem was, some of those investors knew more about the property than the homeowners because they went in there and they remodeled the entire house.
Yeah,
And then they said there was no seller's disclosures. So in that scenario, even if they haven't ever been in the property, if they're the one that's signing for it, they still have to fill out the seller's property disclosure. Okay, so that's a 16-page document. Used to be 7, now it's 16 pages. But it covers everything.
Is that the disclosures? That
Yeah.
we were talking
Uh-huh.
about that are, I thought there was 14 or 16, right?
Pages
Well.
or numbers, let's see.
Numbers up then.
There's 14, no, I said 16 pages. It's 15, 16,
Wow,
16, 17, 18.
I'm
Thank
talking about something else, I think.
Oh, you're talking about in the rep sheet.
Uh-huh,
Yeah, no, section 7 of the rep sheet, that's different than this. This is
Gotcha.
part of that. Yeah, this has got a ton of them. So
Yeah, gotcha.
see how fast we fly through this one? Any questions on seller's disclosures?
No.
Fill them out. Not for them, but have the seller fill them out. There's your foreign investment.
mhm.
Seller warrants, it represents the buyer, the seller is or is not. So they're gonna check that if,
That's opening a can of worms that can be easily avoided. IRS will just take their income tax.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that you have your seller's disclosures filled out. Okay, you have your seller's disclosures filled out. And they have to add to it. They're gonna add to it, you have to do an addendum. You don't have to redo the seller's disclosures, just do an addendum. Addendum 1, so this is referring to the seller's disclosure. So if you're on addendum 5 on your rep C. And you're redisclosing this, it's not addendum 6.
Right,
It's addendum 1 of the property's disclosures. Anytime that something happens, I would put it in there and clarify it, and then have them sign it. And sometimes when you're representing the buyers, this is what I always tell my buyers, All you're doing is acknowledging receipt of it. Doesn't mean you're agreeing with it, you're acknowledging that you received it.
Right.
Okay, so I would have them sign that. Okay, now our wire fraud disclosure. Basically, wire fraud is when new wiring instructions get sent to your client prior to closing and they wire the funds to a bogus account, and then that money's gone. Okay, make sure they understand this, and as an agent, never forward wiring instructions on. Never have it come through you.
Mhm.
Okay, so there was a scenario where, this is in California, one of our California offices, where they forwarded. So they got an email from the title company saying, these are the new wiring instructions. The agent forwarded them onto their client. The client lost their money. Then they went and sued, and they found the agent guilty of forwarding on the fraudulent email. So don't forward on an email that's wiring instructions. Okay.
Seller shouldn't be wiring money anyway.
Not the seller, no, from the buyer.
Right, but the seller still is gonna sign this, so your conversation should be, if anyone asks you to wire,
Oh, yeah,
you shouldn't. You should be getting a wire.
you should be getting a wire, don't change the wires. Yeah, absolutely, good point. Good point, yep. On the seller side. Okay, never do that. And you think that people will understand, but we had a title company in our building here, Fidelity Title.
Mhm.
With Louis Hamner. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he had an attorney wire money out on accident. He didn't read the form.
Gosh.
So you think everybody knows, but they don't. Okay, affiliate business agreement, I think this is our last one. Well, maybe, let's see.
Let pay.
Oh, let me. Okay, so the affiliate business, so basically Century 21 has ownership in different businesses. So North Star Title and Inspiro Financial. Because we have an ownership in those businesses, regardless of whether you use them, we have to disclose that there is some ownership in that type of a business.
Okay,
Okay, so all it is you're disclosing to your client that there is some ownership. Now, if they're using those services, great, definitely important, so they understand that, but if they're not using them, you still need this signed.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last one is sellers, the lead-based paint, acknowledge disclosure. This needs to be filled out prior to you getting an offer.
Mhm.
It needs to be signed by your seller, and the ones that I find we miss the most as agents. Okay, so if you look at the seller disclosure, we're going to disclose what we know. Seller has no knowledge, or they do have knowledge. If they have knowledge, they're going to send it to them. But the one that I find the most is C. See. Let's see. This one's seller has provided buyer
the B one.
records. Yeah, so records there, let's see. Taking it out. Yeah, so if there's any records of it, this is where they're gonna disclose it. Then you're gonna put it on your MLS. I would put it into MLS under documents so they have it,
Mhm.
so they can submit an offer, and then the buyer's going to sign here. If the buyer signs this section here initially, that they will do a 10-day opportunity. Let's say they just mess up, they put it here. You have to include the lead-based paint addendum in your contract. Otherwise, you don't have to, then they would sign here. Okay, agent's acknowledgement, individual, the agent has informed seller, so this is you as the seller's agent. You've informed the seller of your obligation to do that. Other than that, that is your seller packet.
Okay.
Any questions on the seller packet? Anything we talked about?
Jason, I have a question. If you're doing a listing agreement for a trust, the name of the trust goes in as the seller. And you just have to make sure that the signers are on that trust, correct? There isn't anywhere where you list the names of the signers. You're just listing the name of the trust as the seller, correct?
Yeah, if you're dealing with a trust, make sure you get the trust documents, so you know you have the right signers on there. I've seen trusts come in and the person signing is not part of the signers, and then the listing is not valid.
Okay,
it
and
be-
just one signer would be sufficient from that trust, right?
If that's what their trust papers say,
Right.
you have to look at what the trust papers say.
Okay,
So most trust papers, it would not be one signer, it would be everybody that's part of the trust. You would have to have signed, but everything's different. I
Yeah.
mean, it can be however it's set up, but typically, unlike like a signing for an LLC where there's a designated person, trusts are not. One person in the trust can't make decisions for everybody in the trust.
right, okay.
Would it be the worst
Thank
thing to
you.
put the seller's name and the trust in the line? Or do you just want to put the trust?
Just the trust, right?
I would just put the trust. I mean, you're not gonna be, it's not gonna come back and be like, oh, you made a mistake here. It's just gonna be one extra step that you're doing.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
It has to have the trust, though. It has to have the name of the trust in order for it to be valid. So
Okay.
we had a scenario, I think Russ was working on this last week where the seller's trust had 2 signatures. We only had 1 signature. And then they decided that they didn't want to use that brokerage anymore, and they wanted to use our brokerage. And we found out that their listing agreement was not valid because they only had 1 signature instead of 2 signatures. So we were actually able to take that listing over and start marketing it because they didn't have a valid listing contract.
With a trust, you just want to get it to the title company as soon as possible. And let them, where they specialize in that more, let them tell you what needs to happen as far as who needs to all sign and everything.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the official stamp that you can use on their paper.
I don't think everybody has that. No, but that's, I mean, that's the best thing to do. If you find out it's in a trust, go find out who's on the trust and
Yeah.
what it's, how it's written, because how it's written is gotta be specific too.
Do we need to upload a copy of the trust into the dot loop, or just the title company gets it?
The title company gets it. If you have it, you have a copy of it, because some of those are like hundreds of pages long.
Right.
So find the section that refers to selling of real estate, and I would probably upload that, but it's not a document that we. As a company, we're going out and saying, hey, you're selling a trust, I need the trust papers, but. Anything you can put into your dot loop to protect you through the process is going to be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I just asked the title company for that page because they know what page it is. Like I literally had one, this was probably in January of this year. And the seller handed me a stack of papers like this big, and it was not in a binder. It was just all loose
Loose.
paper. They're like, I think this is the trust, so look at it. And I took that whole thing down to title and they're like, oh, I know what I'm looking for. And they went through,
Yeah,
they found the one paper that I needed, scanned it, gave it to me, and I was like, thank you.
yeah.
Then I put it in binder form. So, all right. Okay, as long as you guys online put your numbers in there, Russ will give you credit for it. Then you guys sign this, right?
Mhm.
Good. So you get credit for that. And then we'll be back on Thursday for Repsy. Douglas, do you get to do Repsy with me next on Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
If I wait for the next cycle, will it still be you teaching it?
The next cycle, if you
I'm
wait,
joking. I'll be here.
yes, your dad gave me the ones he doesn't want to teach.
So all of them,
No, the contract ones.
smart, because you're so good with contracts, Jason.
That's all right. Actually, he wanted to teach today because his other obligation he didn't want to do, but I was already on the schedule.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. See ya.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.